The 2015 Polyglot Gathering is brought to you by italki. Become fluent in any language.
The talk, as you already know from the booklet, or just in case you ended up in this room because there was nothing better to do, I can remind that can immersion possibly hinder language acquisition? And that's a risk to giving a lecture a question as a title, because it's a yes or no question. You probably already think, can it? Yes. Or can it? No. Can it hinder language acquisition, or can it not? So please don't tell me. Keep the answer all to yourself. Listen to what I have to say. And at the end, I will ask you, what did you think at the beginning? Do you think that immersion, the situation being surrounded by the language, can it hinder, can it damage your language acquisition or not? And again, probably you have the answer already. If not, think yes or no, keep it to yourself. And another point as an introduction, and the introductory point is that it's going to be this talk is going to be rather personal. There have been speakers here giving you lots of information and links and really lots of valuable stuff, valuable information. Me and the subject of immersion, what I can share, what I can talk about is my personal experience only. And since we're all polyglots here and we are kind of a tight circle, I hope it will resonate with you, and probably you have something to add. You will. What I will tell you, it will, as I say, it will resonate, and it will speak to you. But again, being such a personal subject, I feel most insecure speaking about myself and about personal issues. But I do want to share immersion. Why and how come? When did we? What do we think about this word immersion? When I first came into contact with this notion of immersion was when I was studying towards my BEd. Yes, we were told that the best was my formal education is that of an English teacher. So immersion, we were told that immersion creating an immersion situation in a classroom is the best way to teach children. It's this old approach. If other teachers around here, yes, so immersion, teach. Your students should learn a language as baby does, like being surrounded by the language, listening to the sounds of the language, and just being, into it. Even back then, when I was studying towards the degree, I had my doubts about this approach, because, even if you have English lessons every day, 45 minutes a day, and even if you are a teacher and you just speak, in front of the classroom and you speak only English, it's not an immersion situation. Yeah, I would think that immersion is something when you're surrounded by the language. Yes, 24/7, like every day, from morning till night, you hear the language, you hear your target language, and it creates something, maybe, possibly, in your brain. But in school, you can never create. So the theoretical notion of immersion, the artificial immersion in a classroom, of course, I always doubted, but I never doubted the immersion situation of coming to a country and being surrounded by a language. I always thought it's the best way to learn the language, because I had a very successful experience of learning a language by immersion. Yes, so basically. That's why it is my personal story. Basically, I was born in Russia, and at the age of 17, I moved to Israel. I can say I immigrated to Israel, but it's not what we say in Israel. In Israel, we say we do aliyah. Aliyah in Hebrew means ascending, like rising up. That's how we call it. There is a special word for immigration in Hebrew, but in general, like in Hebrew, for people coming from all kinds, from all Jews coming back to Israel, it's called ascension, aliyah. So I made aliyah when I was 17 years old. I studied Hebrew before. I studied in Jewish school for 3 years. I came with kind of passive Hebrew. You know how it is when you study a language theoretically in school, and then you come to the country and you have to use it actively. You have to function in the language. And for me, this experience was a good and interesting experience. I remember I tried to use, of course, my Hebrew as much as I can, and I also I was living in the dormitory and I was attending lectures in Hebrew. I remember my first month, I was sitting at those lectures, totally in Hebrew, from morning till evening. I was understanding, just understood nothing. Yeah, I was sitting for hours and hours and understood nothing. Next month, second month, I started making notes, and I don't know. I threw them away. I probably they were incomprehensible, but I made notes, and at the third month, I remember that experience. At the third month, it was just like, wow! I started to understand. The understanding like emerged, and yes, like I belong. I understand what they're talking about. I understand, and I can ask a question. You know, during lecture, I can raise my hand. I can ask a question, and that was a moment of success for me, and. Then afterwards, of course, I lived in Israel for all my grown-up life. I lived in Israel, so Hebrew is my second mother tongue. So though I was not born with Hebrew as a mother tongue, but I lived there for, like all my life. So having such a successful experience with Hebrew, I was quite happy with it, and then it was like 4 years ago. It appeared that we have, as a family, we have plans. Maybe there is a chance that my husband is going to write his doctoral dissertation in Germany. So it was obvious that probably if we move to Germany, maybe we should start learning German. So we started learning German. I started learning German, and it was interesting. Though it interfered with my studies of Japanese, which I love dearly. I had to stop. I had to put aside my Japanese. I started learning German for a year. And at first, it's a fun experience because German, unlike Japanese, it's a little bit has some similarities with English, and I enjoyed it tremendously, using the materials from Deutsche Welle, listening, reading, learning words. It was a very nice experience for a year and a half. And then I was thinking all the time, and I found a tandem partner, actually a nice woman from Switzerland. From Switzerland, she was learning Hebrew, and I was learning German, and we were having a really nice time. We had the same level, this successful tandem when you have the same level of knowledge, and it really helped me out. And then I was thinking, I need just a little push, some small push. If I lived in a German-speaking country for 3 months, as I did, as it's happened to me with Hebrew, it will be a boost. I will speak German fluently and confidently. Then actually it happened what we expected. We got all the documents ready, and my husband, he did find his place to write his doctorate in Germany. So here we are, moving to Germany for a while for his doctorate. So here I am in Germany, and a month passes, 2 months, 3 months, and I don't feel the same thing I felt in Israel. Like after 3 months, this miracle, it did not happen. And imagine my kind of lack of confidence and frustration, like what's happening, why? Okay, I'll give myself more time. I continue. I insisted on speaking German in Germany for the first year. Now it's 2.5 years that I'm in Germany, yes. But the first year and a half or even more, I insisted speaking only German. I did not use English. I pretend I do not speak English, and it works very nicely in German. Nobody insists. If you speak German in Germany, nobody will switch to English. People really support it. People really, they really make you believe that you're kind of, maybe you speak incomprehensible German, but it's German. Okay, so, but after a year, and even after a year and a half, the miracle did not happen. And I have to admit it. It's not easy to admit it. It's a story of my failure. No, not really a failure, but I really want to share this experience with you. And I was frustrated. I was thinking, why? Why didn't this miracle happen again? I wanted this miracle to happen again to me. It didn't come. Why? And then I said, I give up. I start speaking English in Germany. Enough. I'm not mad. This effort, es lohnt sich nicht. Like, it's not worth it. I started speaking English. Relax. I'm speaking English. Forget it. And then I had some weird conversation. And then I somehow, when I started being more relaxed, Oh no. And then I was talking to my mom in Skype, and my mom, she lives now in Israel. She followed me. We lived in Russia, and then I moved to Israel after a couple of years. After 7 years, my mom and my dad, they moved after me to Israel. And we started learning Hebrew together while I was at school. Then I moved to Israel, and after like 5, 6, 7 years, my parents moved after me. When I already spoke good Hebrew, my mom and dad didn't learn Hebrew. My mom, who studied Hebrew with me, we were on the same level. Then, after 7 years, she comes to Israel, and she can't start speaking Hebrew. And I find myself always encouraging her and talking, Mom, go out, talk to people, take some course in Hebrew. I know you know enough. Like, imagine a picture like my mom with a notebook, and she's writing down the words, which she's learning, and she knows like lots and lots of words. She has a good vocabulary, but she's not using it, and she's saying probably I'm too old, and probably I am too shy, and that's my mom. She speaks Russian. She's also an English teacher. She loves languages. I know that. And I was always thinking, what's wrong with my mom? When at this point, after a year and a half in Germany, I heard myself saying, maybe I'm just too old. It's not just the same as it was with Hebrew. I'm just too old for learning a language. I'm just, maybe I'm too shy. I'm too shy of making mistakes. Did you hear it, right? Like I was always against it. I was always telling my mom, why are you saying? It's just, no, you just don't give yourself the opportunity. And here I find myself saying the same thing. And, and also probably I'm telling myself, no, I'm just not putting enough effort. Same thing I used to tell my mom. And then I started thinking, like, what's happening? What is happening? Well, I don't believe in my own arguments. I don't believe in what I'm saying about myself. But I have no other explanations. I started thinking very hard, what are the explanations? What's in common between my mom's situation and my situation? Something happened there. I did not realize until some funny moment when I spoke to some guy from London who was speaking about his mom, and his mom, she came from India. And he was telling that his mom, she evidences she is too shy to speak English. She is learning English by the old books, though she lives in London for 10 years, 15 years, 20 years for long. She still does not speak perfect English because she says she's too old, she's too shy, she's afraid to make mistakes. It's like rings the bell. It's like in Hebrew we say, at this moment, nafal ha'asimon, the coin fell. I think the German speakers, there is some German expression very similar, when like the coin falls, maybe it's the vendor machine or something. At the moment of understanding, this eureka moment, I had this eureka moment, like what do we all have in common? And at the moment I asked this question, everything became clear to me. What's there in common between me coming to Germany, my mom coming to Israel, some Londoner's mother coming to London from India? It is probably a very similar situation of immigration, even though it's not immigration here, even for coming for a long stay, coming to some place to live for a prolonged time. It has maybe certain impact, but I still could not understand what's the difference. I came to Israel to live. It's also kind of a way, it's also maybe an immigration. What's the difference? Me coming to Germany and me coming to Israel. What's the difference with me coming to Israel back then and all the people I know who came to Israel, for example? There are many Russian speakers, older generation. You can see them not acquiring Hebrew properly. You can see the same thing if you look around, probably in the U.S. Many immigrants coming to the U.S. and they just, maybe when they come in their 40s or something, they do not learn the language properly and have all kinds of excuses. And probably my questions are not unique. I've seen right now in on the schedule another lecture by Tim Keeley. Yes, it's on Monday. Probably my evidence can be kind of a chapter, one of the chapters in his book. Yes, because the learning language has many different psychological aspects. So it has something to do with some psychological aspects. So I'm going to talk about challenges of, I don't know, moving to another country. I'm not calling it immigration. It's not always the situation of immigration. So what are the ingredients that make this experience unique? Because it is a situation of immersion. It is the situation when you live in the country, like every day you encounter the language, every day you are surrounded by the language you learn and that you want to learn. What happened actually? What's happening? What's so special about this situation of coming to some place to live for a long time, for years? Doesn't matter how many, like from 3 years to ever. And I started to analyze what were my experiences with German. And when I start thinking back, then first experience with German was of course, to communicate with the owner of the apartment, yes, and to understand why is it that we have no internet in the apartment. Very, nice situation to practice your German, right? Like, how come? How come you promised us internet? Where is it? And I really insisted on speaking him with, communicate with my lame German, and yes, and we I more or less understood, but still we got no internet. And this is a situation when, you need something from the language you're learning. You really need a result. You really need not only to communicate your thoughts, and if you fail, it's fine. It's just a game. It's not a game. I really wanted kind of a result. Really wanted internet back then. And then what else? What were my other chances to communicate in German? For example, Ausländerbehörde. Somebody heard this awful and dreadful word, Ausländerbehörde. They do not speak English there if you want to. I didn't. You have to go to the Ausländerbehörde and speak confidently, and speak so that you will be accepted, so that you will be understood, so that you will get what you need, your visa, whatever. You really want to make a good expression with your language. It's a responsibility. Then, what else in German? Yes, finding school for my daughter. You have to go to the school to talk to the principal, as a family, and you all three, at least you make an impression that you are really, working hard on your German, and you really try not to make mistakes. You know how it is about making mistakes in the language. You always make mistakes, but really, now you have to make the best impression possible, the best, to give the best performance. The best possible performance, because you need this result. Because you're doing it for your family, for your children, you have to. So, all these encounters with the language, what it makes, the language you're learning. Basically, as people who like languages, I'm not a polyglot. You see, I do not speak so many languages. There are 3 languages in which I probably can give such a lecture, and 2 languages in which I can try to understand something like this. And that's it. But basically, if we learn languages, we will learn it because it's a passion, because it's something interesting. We learn languages for fun, basically. When you take your fun tool, something you do for fun, and try to make it useful. It's something I did with my German, probably. I tried to make some use of it. It was, instead of something for fun, it turned to a tool of survival. And it made something wrong. It just worked just the other way around. And because if I sum things up, it's like the challenges of this immigration situation are the inevitable consequences. I mean, you have to get a result. If you do not speak, if you do not use your language well, there are consequences. If you do not use your language, if you do not, yes, and then, of course, the situations are usually stressful, and the level of the vocabulary you are likely to meet, you're likely to encounter, is maybe higher than the one you are prepared for. Because if these are, the survival stuff, it's when you have to read documents, you have to read, it's even not newspaper, it's something usually like filling in forms and documents. These things are stressful. So when learning a language, it has probably a negative impact, at least on your whole emotional, your whole attitude towards learning a language. This is I can evidence it on my own experience. Probably you people have some similar experiences. I really want to hear it afterwards. Then I was thinking back then, why? Okay, now I know what's happening with me and my German, and it's probably the same thing that happened to many immigrants to the US and to England and to Israel, of course, which I evidenced. I can tell you there are many people who just live in the country, do not speak the language enough. Now, why was it? What was the miracle that happened to me with Hebrew, which I love dearly? And it was the same situation, wasn't it? I came to a country to live. It was obvious that I came there to stay. And I was young, I was 17. I do not believe it. I do not believe that age matters, really. I don't have a good memory, I never had. So, nothing changed. Okay, so what was back then in Israel that made this miracle happen? And when I'm thinking back, I came to, I lived in the dormitory, I was just attending classes, so then I was studying. And I was studying, and I was studying. And studying is very different from working. Because working, it's for real. It's for real. You have to do something and they pay you for it. When you study, it's a kind of game. If you fail in an exam, it's not nice. You can do moed bad. It's in Hebrew. You can do it again. You can redo your exam. It's not. It's troublesome, but it's not crucial. Also, studies. Yes, now it's like studies are a game. Like also, in Israel, it's an interesting situation. I had a family in Israel. I got married in Israel. It's like you have a back. Yes, you're not on your own. You are not alone, which creates a very positive situation for language learning, for language studying, not being on your own. Like if you have questions, you have somebody to turn to, somebody you trust. Also, a very interesting aspect is, forgive me for being personal, I had my child in Israel. Having a child in a country in which the language of which is foreign at the beginning is very beneficial because, it's like you grow up again. You learn all the aspects of the layers of the language, of your target language. You learn all the aspects from the beginning, like, children's songs, yes, and the culture. You acquire it together with your child. Like, once again, you have this chance, once again, to learn the language as a child together with the child. And also, that's a family. Family, as I said, family and members of the family who speak Hebrew, of course, it's very beneficial. I heard people say that if you want to speak French, have a French girlfriend. You cannot do it with every language you learn, but definitely, yes, it helps. So far, it's only half an hour. So far, this. Which made me all the following made me rethink the concept of immersion. How it's not a magic pill, probably. Immersion is not a bless you. Probably immersion is not a magic pill. Immersion is not something that would work automatically for everyone and everywhere. And if we consider what's the best situation for us to learn a language? Like we would think, oh, I'm learning Chinese. I wish I were in China. Then my Chinese would boost my understanding of Chinese. Probably think twice. For how long do you want to go to China? Do you want to work in China? For example, I'm learning Japanese now, so I think sometimes I have this dream that if I went to Japan, if I worked in Japan, then it would be like immersion situation. I would all of a sudden start speaking Japanese, but no, I think probably not. Probably a real life first stressful situation is not something we need for learning a language. So this immersion that we hear a lot about immersion, it's another holy cow of language learning. Like, fluency, you cannot say fluency without thinking twice about what you mean. Immersion is the same because it's not. Only by immersion, miracles will not happen, yes? And be very careful with immersion, because immersion can ruin something, as I admit, probably it did for me. Because immersion can be demanding, stressful, and not protected. When we speak about children learning a language, I'm back to this idealistic notion of learning a language like a baby. Babies learn their language in the natural way by immersion, of course, but this immersion is a very protected immersion. You cannot imagine more positive situation, but you all probably all read about it, that it's only by positive reinforcement you teach children language. If a child makes a mistake, you do not frown, or you do not turn away, or a child never ends up without his lunch. It's not that you won't feed your child if he makes a mistake. And with some immigration immersion situation, it happens to be something like this. If you do not, make a perfect performance of the language you learn, you'll end up, without your lunch or something. Really negative consequences. And it's not, in general, for learning, it's not beneficial. Yes, learning should be fun, otherwise it does not stick. So my conclusions are, and it was really short, probably you have a longer break. My conclusions are that if you people plan some long stay in the country of your target language, plan well, plan in advance. Make your stay as pleasurable and enjoyable as possible, without responsibilities, without necessities that are connected, that may spoil such a pleasurable experience of learning a language as it can be. Basically, I think you'll have a longer break. I think I just said all I had to say. And if you have experiences similar to mine, I would really love to share. And if you have advice beyond what I have to say, I really would love to hear. That's it.
I'll share something. You want to go first?
Do you need microphone?
Yeah, please. There's two. You can use that one. Thanks for sharing your experiences with us. I agree with you totally on one point, which is that immersing yourself somewhere can completely change your perception of a language. So for my case, it's in China now. And before I left, I didn't study anything, which was probably a mistake, like you said. But you can't go back. I got to go up from here. But these days, when you're down in the ruts of where you are and the immersion experience is coming into filling out forms and that kind of thing, it can really change your perception of something that you thought was, beautiful and ideal just in your mind. So you have to kind of face up with the challenge of doing something with it rather than just pursuing some hobby or fun thing. So I'm glad you mentioned that. But something I wanted to counter was the idea that we should try to follow the example of like babies learning languages and do this natural thing where you surround yourself with the items in the language and listen all day and this kind of thing. Because I think we tend to forget that babies make mistakes, and like toddlers make years and years and years of mistakes and constant correction and like grammar patterns and that type of thing. And they always do plurals wrong and that type of thing. And we forget that actually they spend much more time than we probably do, because we can learn from the mistakes and point them out, and the children actually take longer to learn. So to compare yourself to something like that natural, I think is actually harmful in the same way that immersing yourself could be. So.
Absolutely. If I sounded that I disagree with you, that's absolutely wrong. I absolutely 100% am behind you. I'm just concentrate on the aspect of fun and no consequences. But what you say is, I absolutely agree with you.
Also, speaking to what you said about having a child and growing up with it, I found that being immersed in a language, for me, really only worked very well when I had a linguistic mother. So I stayed in a woman's house for 6 months, 6 months in Catalonia, and she spoke to me all day in Catalan, and she understood enough English to explain herself in very simple language when I misunderstood something. And then when I decided to start speaking after 6 months, she, for a month and a half, corrected me all the time, and I spoke as much as I could, and she said, no, say it this way, or this is better, we wouldn't say that, that's from English. And so for me personally, that kind of immersion only worked when I really did emulate the experience of a baby, no, but almost as completely as an adult can. I was in her house for 6 months, I was helping her renovate it, all I had to do was work in the house and listen to her chat at me. But a normal adults don't have that privilege when they're learning a language. So their life gets in the way. So when I came to Germany, I chose to take a job instead of teaching English that would require me to speak German 8 to 10 hours a day and make friends with my colleagues. And it's not always, you can't do that everywhere, but I found that really helped to have friends and different situations, not only official situations in which I had to speak German, but friendly situations.
Yeah, I'm from Canada originally, and I've lived in Germany for 3.5 years now, and I totally understood what you said about the Ausländerbehörde. So I remember when I first came here, and I would get not just the Ausländerbehörde, but also insurance, or you get these letters in the mail, and just wow, that word is taking up half of the line, and it's very stressful. And I think, I think it. When you were talking about Israel and how immigration is understood in a different way, and also in Israel, I've heard, if a woman is going into a taxi, she might give her baby to the taxi to set up the taxi driver to, set up the chair. So it's a much more welcoming, perhaps, or it seems more welcoming. And I think that, obviously, if you feel at home and if you feel comfortable, then that's learning anything will be easier. So that's
absolutely. That's a good point. Like in Israel, I remember I was saying, sorry, my after like 3 months in Israel, sorry, my Hebrew is not so good. Your Hebrew is amazing. Yeah. Here in Germany, sorry, my Hebrew is not, my German is not so good. No, that's fine. I understand you.
Yeah, if you're hearing nothing from a German, everything's good.
Yeah.
They only tell you the.
Yes, I want to just tell a little bit story of my life. I learned German already before I came to Austria, and I already could speak German quite well, I think, and I could communicate with people in Germany. But in the first day when I came to Austria, it was quite difficult because they speak a little bit different German, and I realized that it's a little bit hard to understand. And I didn't feel really comfortable to speak German because I had a problem with the bank account because I tried to speak German, but all my other students who didn't speak German, they get their bankomat card much faster than me because they spoke English, and I tried to speak German. Yes, and then I had one more problem because in my student dorm, I was the only one student who had bed bugs in the room. And then I spent like 1 month trying to talk to the dormitory administration and to everyone and try to solve this problem. And I had so a lot of stress that I think that in the end, in Austria, and then I had a lot of stress with the studies, yes, and I think that in the end, during half a year in Austria, I didn't really improve my German, unfortunately, but at least it didn't become worse than it was. That's already a good thing. Yes, but it's just to the point that stress can really hinder the language acquisition, because in the first time I had really a lot of stress and couldn't really speak German.
Thank you.
Well, first of all, thank you very much. It was very interesting, and I think I've been to Tel Aviv a week, and to me it felt like I was in Italy. Like the people were so warm. I was asking them, like, I don't speak any Hebrew, but I was asking, how do I go to Rabin Square? And they will not just tell me where it is, they just walk with me. They were coming from the opposite direction. They will just turn around. So I understand how beautiful language parents they could be. And maybe I understand why German is totally different. So I tried my 1 week of German when I moved here last summer, and it was horrible. I mean, I had the same experience that she had in Austria, probably. But I want to say that immersion, I don't think it works. But when you said about protected, I think you mentioned protected immersion. How do we recreate it? That's always how do we recreate your situation with the old woman talking to you and the Hebrews? How do we make sure that natives give us this experience? Like, can we influence this instead of course, we cannot maybe change Germany, we can try, but can we do something? Is it something that you think we can do to make immersion more protected?
Probably after at that moment when I said that's it, my romance with German is over, I'm speaking only English, all of a sudden I found one tandem, Russian German, and then after a month I found another tandem, Hebrew German, and now probably I found another German Hebrew German tandem. So when you kind of let things go, things start to work out. That's as far as I went. And people have more advice, welcome.
Thank you for sharing your experience, and I need to say that until the beginning of this year, I lived for 2.5 years in Denmark, and even though I learned the language, how this happened, it is a little bit of mystery to me, but but at the beginning, I need to say that. The environment matters, and for instance, when you go to a more developed country to learn its language, it happens that you have less need to communicate with the people, because when you go to shop, you don't need to talk with the cashier. When you can do almost all of the operations online, and you don't have the need of this everyday talk in developed countries. And moreover, in countries with higher immigration rate, you also have greater chances of being protected. And my personal, and also and you can also get a lot of peer pressure to speak only English. And for me, these obstacles were negative for my language learning. But I think that maybe at one moment I said to myself that whatever happens, I will speak only in Danish. And now I live in Romania, in one city which is not really popular, which is not really touristic. And I find easier to speak to local people, since I have also studied the language beforehand. But of course, I also get a lot of pressure from my colleagues to spend all the time with them and to speak English. So, in conclusion, So my conclusion is that the best way to master a foreign language as an adult is to do a study in that language in the country, because also maybe to find a student job, since you will need to make money, which requires you also to speak that language, and this is maybe because of this you succeeded, because you were forced to study in Hebrew.
Yes, I went to studies in Hebrew. Here I also tried to go to lectures like as a Freiherr, but it didn't work out. But I tried. Yeah.
But
yeah, that's definitely so. Yeah, thank you. Yeah. Okay, it goes.
I just want to share something that worked very well for me. When I first moved to Germany, I moved to a very small town, and we had a company of 60 people, and I was the only Canadian in the company and the only native speaker. So everyone was very interested to speak English with me, and I was very interested to speak as much German as I could. And what I got this idea from Canada. In Canada we have English and French as the national languages. And they suggested that if you're in a relationship with someone who's native English and native French, that you speak 1 week of one language and 1 week of the other. And to resolve the situation at my company, I said, okay, we're going to have an English week and a German week. And I can say many things about the Germans, but they love a good rule. And so this was completely acceptable, and I would be at coffee break, and people would come, is it English week, is it English week? No, this week is German week. And I said, okay. And then we would speak German, and it worked very well. It worked very well, and but it because it gives you your chance to really work, and it's stressful, but it's a good stress, and then you have your chance to relax, and you also have this situation where both people have their sort of power, where well, I'm the native speaker, I'm comfortable, I can correct you, and then you're the native speaker, you can correct me. So it worked very well for me.
Very creative, very resourceful.
Anyone else?
So thank you for that also, and thank you for the talk. Thank you for sharing. I know it's a vulnerable topic. I want to share a bit about how I managed to kind of weasel my way into some Finnish environments, and basically it took me like 2 years. I love gymnastics, artistic gymnastics, and it took me 2 years to get up the courage to go to a class, because every time I think about it, I was like, I just can't, and. I went to one like circus class, and I didn't tell anyone I was foreign, and then they were talking to me, and I was like, and I had like no idea what they were saying, and I never went back. But it was also because I was kind of part-time. I was living in 2 cities, so it was really hard to commit to something like that, and as a student also, whatever. So finally, I get a job in English in Finland, and then I say, okay, if I sit at this desk for 8 hours a day, I'm going to go insane, so now I'm going to sign up for gymnastics. So for about 1.5 years, I went twice a week, I trained with Finns, and my first day there, I was like, hi, I'm foreign, hi, nice to meet you. And I spoke quite a bit of Finnish, but I was just so terrified, that first step of going there, and there'll be people you don't know, and it sounds really silly, because maybe some of you guys have met me, but it's different there. And after 1.5 years, I learned a lot of the vocabulary in that context, and actually decided, okay, well, I've done some coaching in Canada, why not coach in Finland? So I went to the club and I talked to them, and they gave me a job coaching gymnastics to kids. And this was like I'd done the coaching thing before, and it was baptism by fire. So it's like, here are some kids, coach them, and that's how it started. And then this was like, here are some Finnish kids, coach them. And after the first day, I was like, wow, I don't know how to say like any of the stuff in Finnish, because I just knew like cartwheel, somersault, and none of the connecting words between all of those. But it was such a good way to get a lot of confidence, and you're working with a pretty limited vocabulary. There's still some babysitting involved, but ultimately, yeah, then you have these challenges where the kids are like, and you don't understand what they're saying. But it's really, they're patient and they're funny, because they're like, why do you speak weird? And they don't like know you're foreign, they just know you speak funny. So in that place where I coach 9 hours a week, now it's 6, but whatever, people know me as a Finnish person. In that, in that place, everyone speaks Finnish to me, and I never feel like a foreigner. And so having a place like that, it's sacred. And I even have a friend who's like, oh, I'm Canadian too, by the way. She's like, oh, you're Canadian, let's speak English. And I'm kind of like, oh, don't cramp my style here, because this is my sacred place. So I encourage you all to go find sacred places. And you don't even have to speak in the beginning, but you can really make them your own. So.
This is very briefly. I think it's really cool, like when you are in a foreign country and you have a skill that it could be play the guitar. And now you teach that skill in German, let's say, even for free or for like €2 per hour. Now all the people listening to you, you are the god in there. So even though your German or Finnish might be crap or like building up, they will listen to you anyway, and they will talk to you a lot because they want to know about things that you know. And to me it happened in a way, like in a similar way, but I found it very powerful. So now I'm thinking to actually open a Lithuania channel where I teach some stuff that I know in Lithuanian, and then definitely, even like not high price, but low price or even for free. But then I will get a lot of extra practice talking about something that I love anyway, and they don't know. So I can even invent if I don't know the words, because they don't know any way how to do it. So it's double easier.
About having this environment that speaks only, making yourself, forcing yourself into a real environment that speaks only the target language. I have evidence of my daughter. She goes to school. Half of her school speak Russian. So when she can, she slides back into Russian. So she speaks. So that's why she says, "Oh, German is so difficult. Oh, I cannot speak German." Then she went to a practicum for 2 weeks, and at practicum she was doing in a friseur salon, so it was the hairdressers, and nobody spoke Russian. And in 2 weeks, after 2 weeks, she comes home and, wow, I speak German now. that's after a year in a German school where half of the kids spoke Russian. So it didn't help at all. So after 2 weeks of real like this kind of immersion situation, it worked. More or less.
But
Okay.
it probably did work, but you didn't know. You didn't trust it. It's when you're hearing it all the time, it's in your...
Oh, maybe. Okay, take no more questions. Yeah. Microphone.
Hi, I'm Jiuchen from Taiwan. Actually, I want to share my experience of how my failure of learning German. Even though right now I'm already enrolled into a German university and doing my master program in German history in German, but yes, I did have difficulties when I was learning German, and because my greatest difficulty back then was I couldn't tell the difference between accusative object and the dative object. Yes, yes, you could understand me. Yes, 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 obviously, yes, yes, and I had. Yes, yes. And what's worse for me is I came from Chinese, and Chinese is a language that you do not have so much of complex grammatical structures differences to understand. So for me, I did a very strange thing. I actually learned Latin, and I learned Latin to understand how the difference of cases and yes, and somehow when I managed to understand the differences of cases in Latin, and when I decided to go back to relearn my German again, it's actually improved. And yes, it becomes much better, so I can speak German and understand German. Finally, I can understand what's the difference between accusative and dative object. And finally, yes, I can use it in a sentence. But there are some problems, and because of maybe due to my personality, as you can see that I like to label myself as I'm active for certain language and passive for certain language, which means that for some language I'm more comfortable to speak, and for some language I'm more used to just learn by reading. I do not know why, but for some languages I pick up in such a way that for Japanese or even Japanese and Spanish and a few other languages which I can read, or even French I can read, but I do not have this courage, or maybe that it's something that hinders me to speak to people, but I could understand it. And yes, it's kind of passive, strange ability to comprehend the language. Yes, but I would say maybe trying to learn a more difficult language, it do helps to understand a much simpler language. Yes.
Thank you, people. Yeah, I'm learning. It's not. I feel like it's not like I gave a talk. Like it was a counseling session for me. Thank you all.
Yeah. Can I say one more thing? Yeah. You threw out the question about, we can't really change Germany, right? But I was thinking about that a little bit more, and we might not be able to make our environment change, but I think we can change our environment in that, like you guys were saying, surrounding yourself, putting yourself in situations where you will get that exposure. And even, like, I was in France, and I'm pretty happy with my academic level of French, but my slang, I wanted to learn more like the street talk, and I ended up joining a soccer team, and you wouldn't believe the slang that I learned on the soccer team. So just making it possible, putting the people around you that volunteer at a homeless shelter, whatever. If you can volunteer your time, it depends on what you have available, but just maybe as an encouragement, don't look at it as, this is hopeless, like this country is not going to help me. But how can your neighbor help you? How can your community help you? And yeah, don't give up. There are ways.
Thank you. I think that's it. Thank you, everybody.